All right, so for our January 2022 Scrum User Group Meetup, I'm going to turn the floor over to Russell Miller.
Hi, folks. I consider it a privilege to spend this time with you and to thank you for giving me some of your time. You're welcome to turn your cameras on if you like. That'll make it a little bit easier for me to, I think one camera just went off there. That's humorous. It'll be easier for me to see your reactions, and children and pets and spouses and significant others are welcome on the camera. I'm a professional Scrum trainer, and have the privilege of working with Improving since when? Since I guess the middle of last year, or a little bit longer. I'm based in Atlanta. I think I mentioned that I'm a trainer with Scrum.org and have been for 6 or 7 years. So that gives me pleasure to be able to share with folks some of the mistakes that I've made and encourage them not to do those things, and share with them some of the successes that I've experienced, and explain to them some of the ways that I've achieved some of those successes. It's interesting that success has many paths, and what is it? There's also a saying that I'm reminded of, that success has many fathers, but failure is an orphan. I don't know if you ever heard that saying, and the idea is nobody wants to claim the failures, but everybody wants to claim the successes. So I've been part of some successful activities, and I can share those as well. So who can tell us the topic of today's talk? It's from the meetup description. All right, Mark.
Why are you hurting your team with your sprint review?
Look at you. Way to go. Can I give him, let's see, a reaction here? There you go. I'm going to give him a little applause emoji there. Good job, Mark. And I can even do a little golf clap, right? 15-foot putt. Way to go, Mark. All right. I'm going to share my presentation, this presentation, in a tool that I love. It's a mind mapping tool. One disadvantage of the tool and my setup, even though I have 4 displays, is it will occupy full screen of whatever display that I have, at least as I present. So right now I'm going to be talking and looking down at my laptop display. So it's nothing personal. It's nothing personal, Kayla. It's just that I call on people by name and speak to their name. But it's just that that's where the presentation material is. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to pick that. I don't want to pick that screen. I want to pick that app. So I'll share that app. Beautiful. So here is the first, the overview of the topic that I wanted us to examine. Why are you hurting your team with your sprint review? My name's Russell Miller. I'm working with Improving in Atlanta, and I put, for historical purposes, I put the where we are and the date. My intention is to upload this to my LinkedIn handle, and I'm going to put my LinkedIn handle at the end, and so you can check on that tomorrow or the next day, and I hope to have included that. This tool allows me to save files in HTML format, which is pretty awesome. I think that's the format, and allows you to expand on these nodes after the fact. So I want to tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then we'll tell you some things, and then maybe I'll go over the high level of what I tried to tell you. So we're going to look at some common sprint review practices, and I'm going to encourage you to share some practices that you're aware of, and I'll probably try to quickly type them in. I want us to look at the purpose of a sprint review, and there's a lot of material there. If you have multiple displays and already have somewhere in your arsenal the 2017 version of the Scrum Guide, you can pull that up for reference. Because some of the information in the 2017 version, in fact, most of the version is more prescriptive than the 2020 guide, and that's intentional. 2020 guide is lighter in weight and lighter in specific prescriptions. But the 2017 guide is important to consider for some ways that that sprint review could be conducted. And it'll be very helpful, I think, in this presentation. I'd like you each on your own in a minute to write down a list of things you think should be inspected in the sprint review. And if you're really bold, you can share those with us. And if you're not that bold, you can just compare your list, secretly, privately, to what we talk about in the rest of the presentation. But I hope we can keep, ego low and humility high. And if you want to share some things that, and risk being encouraged later, then you're welcome to do that. I'd like us to answer the question, what are the problems if we don't focus on this? And I've included the red there, the text. The result of the sprint review is a what? What's the next phrase there? Right here. Result of the sprint review is a revised what? Anyone? Bueller?
Product backlog.
There you go. Thank you very much. So that's the purpose of a sprint review. I'm going to suggest a call to action so that you can make this real in your own work and life. And here's my LinkedIn handle. So let's dive in, shall we? Some common sprint review practices. So I'd like to share with you some suboptimal, that's less than optimal, that's a very polite way of saying wrong, and some misguided practices. Well, I guess that's not a polite way of saying wrong, but suboptimal is just less than optimal. So let's look. Whoa, wow, Russell's made a big list of suboptimal practices. Man, okay. Let me go forward here. Here's a quote from, bear with me. There we go. And there we go. And that's not what I wanted to happen. Well, I'll just scroll up. Here's a quote from a leader. Did you complete all the work you committed to? Who's heard that question asked? Anybody besides me? Okay. Leader, did you complete all the work you forecast? So that's a leader who's a little bit of knowledge, because she said forecast instead of commit. That's a progress. The sprint review is a demo, right? Well, it's partly right. The demo is so leaders can pass judgment on how much was completed. Who's experienced a sprint review like that? It doesn't look like you got much done. Is that all you got done? You don't have any more than that to demo for me? How about this? The Scrum team constantly forecasts more than they can deliver, turning the sprint review into an explanation session. Anybody experience this? Constantly explaining why things didn't go better, sprint after sprint after sprint. This reduces the leader's confidence in the team, which often leads to more what? You can just read it out there. Can you see it okay?
Micromanagement.
Yeah. If you think the team is not getting it done and can't be trusted to get it done, if you're a leader, you don't want to just back up and back off and let them, mess things up. So often you take a heavier hand. Have I ever been in that position? Yeah, I've been in that position as a Scrum Master before, but that was early on and I had a lot to learn. I still have a lot to learn. Some other suboptimal and misguided practices is a Scrum Master always and forever facilitating. What's a more mature practice after the team knows how to run a sprint review? Anybody? You can guess. There's partial credit. There's only 3 roles in the Scrum team, right? Developers could facilitate it. Scrum Master could facilitate, or Product Owner could facilitate it. Anyone? If the Scrum Master is the wrong answer, by process of elimination, what would you guess is the right answer?
I think it should be product owner.
It should be the Product Owner. Very good. And we'll talk about why that is in a minute. Scrum Master speaking about forecast delivery dates. Does anyone know who should be forecasting delivery dates? Which of those 3 Scrum roles? All right, you know,
Developer.
no, not the developers. Good guess, Srini. Not the Scrum Master, not the developers. Again, calculatus,
Product owner.
eliminatus. Yes, the product owner. Very good. I'm looking here at what I tried to type. We'll come back to that one. A developer's belief that they are only there in case someone asks them a question or to demonstrate some feature. Have you experienced this where developers think, I'll be here, you know, working on tickets or coding, and someone asks a question, I'll be ready to answer. I know, Glenn. Or if I'm demonstrating something. Now, this may be just ignorance, right? Typically it is ignorance. Like, I don't know why I'm supposed to be here except for those things. And if I'm not doing a demo, why do I need to be here at all? List of suboptimal practices. The sprint review is focused exclusively on features and not outcomes for the customer, internal or external. Now, just a show of hands, how many of the sprint reviews you're part of lately are really focused on customer outcomes? Okay, good job, Katrina. She's been coaching them up well. I don't see any other hands going up. Go ahead,
We
Katrina.
have a huge release that we've been working on for 3 years coming
Yes.
up. And so this quarter, we kind of have no choice. So
Okay. Well, you're forced into, there you go. That's good. Brief anecdote. We were on first vacation in a long time in Colonial Williamsburg, and they had this awesome, I don't know what's called, like a ropes course. You know, you walk in the trees and you slide down, you know, put your hands above your head. So I've got a son that's 15 and a daughter that's 13, and they really wanted to go. And my daughter really wanted me to go. And so we climbed up to the first one that was like 25 feet off the ground. My son slid forward and I was there holding it. And it's like 25 feet. And I'm 38 years old. Ha ha ha. And, but the problem is backing down, Katrina, was really not an option because there was a way I could climb down, but I would be, you know, my daughter would not have me with her and it would be sort of embarrassing. And there was a long way down. And so, okay, Dad just went ahead. And once he went ahead, it's like, okay, this is not so bad. So in your case, Katrina, that's what I was reminded of, in that you didn't really have a way out other than focusing on outcomes. Now, would you, I won't criticize or even probably even comment, would you like to offer up some other, I'll take notes, other suboptimal or misguided sprint review practices that you've seen? Anyone?
when there's no agenda,
Ooh, that's good. That's really a good one. Anyone else? You can put a question mark at the end of it, like Jeopardy. The person's not really sure of the answer, and so they have an inflection at the end, like, I don't know.
Focuses on PowerPoints.
Ooh, good one. Like that one a lot.
Automatically rolling over what's not done into the next sprint.
Oh, that's really good.
not having any stakeholders.
There you go.
Oh, that's a good one. Anybody else? Keep coming. I can type better than I'm letting on right now.
For sign off and funds allocation
For sign off,
and funds allocation, just to show that these are the people who worked on the sprints, and yeah,
okay.
this is the cost. You know, if you work in consultancy, that's what happens sometimes.
For sign off, and just say that, forgive my southern ears. I'll take the blame with Mark.
Funds approval.
Oh, funds
Money.
approval. Yeah, I couldn't get it. Maybe it's because I'm trying to type. I don't know. Funds approval. Very good. Come on now. Let's hear some other. See, I'm going to upload this to the web and you can share this. So you want to be able to share with your colleagues, you know, some things that they might be doing that's wrong or suboptimal. Anyone?
How about no stakeholder engagement or silence?
That's good.
This is maybe less important, but if we're saying suboptimal,
Yeah.
but it's the same person presenting all the time.
Okay.
In our case, we have 4 teams. So when it's the same person, even from the same team presenting, it's not as, I don't know, not as good of opportunity for them to showcase their professional expertise.
How about this one? Surprising stakeholders. Yeah, you don't want to, something's significant or especially bad news, you know, you want to give the stakeholder a heads up or multiple stakeholders a heads up because you don't want them reacting. You want them to show up to the meeting responding. So that means contacting them by email and you know, Teams or ideally a phone call or in person several days in advance. If you try to get them the last, you know, before the meeting, 3 hours, you're not going to get them. Anyone else? What's your pet peeve of sprint review practices that you haven't listed? And then we're going to move on. What have you personally hated about being in a sprint review? Like, I wish they wouldn't do this. Anyone?
About the day-long sprint review.
Oh, wow.
When there wasn't preparation, that's a personal pet peeve. Like you haven't prepared trying to share your screen.
Wow.
I think for me, it's heavy documentation sometimes.
What kind of documentation?
Just all sort of documentation from,
Oh.
you know, just pulling all over, you know, not aligning with what we're doing, but just different documentation just to prove a point.
That's good. Anyone else? See, these, it's going to be recorded. It is being recorded. So this would be a good what not to do, this section here, especially for new Scrum Masters and new product owners. Or am I being, well, since you're sharing, I can't be egotistical about it. These are some of your pet peeves. Anybody? All right. So thank you very much. That's very helpful. Let's see. We've already included the practices that you've seen, good or bad. Oh, no, we haven't. We just saw the bad practices. So any good practices you've seen? We won't take forever on this. Anyone? Good practice that you like? You think's effective? Think's closer to optimal?
Introducing the person who's speaking introduces himself.
What else?
Rotating presenters.
Oh, that's good. Now, is that a rotating presenter or is that not having the same presenter every time?
Yeah, not having the same presenter every time, yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Although if you do that a lot of times, I'm going to get really dizzy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Anyone else? Good practices you like, Lori? Olu, Srini, Joshua, Raj? Anybody?
letting the developers actually talk about what they've worked on as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what they learned.
Well, exactly.
What they learned about the business too.
And then Mark put in the chat, keeping presenters to the timeline.
How much time do we have, Glenn? Okay. I'll take 2 more.
And then the opposite of my pet peeve is preparing.
Go ahead. We're all
Engaging stakeholders.
Ooh, that's good. So the opposite of that, who knows the Charlie Brown teacher that's just a monotone? We don't want to do that. So don't do like I do. Engaging stakeholders.
Yeah, the bigger umbrella of that is making it a conversation and not just an eyes forward presentation.
Ooh, that's good.
Because that gets exactly back to people sitting there coding or running tests, or why are they here? If it's not a conversation, it's not an engaging session.
That's very good. We'll take a couple more if there are people who haven't shared any yet. We'd love to hear from you.
What
I mean,
about
if there are-
getting, what about getting market updates?
Look at you. Look at you. That's a well-trained man there.
Sorry, Russell. So I'm not a Scrum Master, but I see the conversation from a program manager perspective.
Okay.
So these are all inefficiencies that I'm enjoying listening to Scrum Masters talk through.
Okay.
But I see that it's just most of the time when I'm dealing with Scrum Masters or product owners, they just have defined goals, right? So having good defined goals, I would say, is a good.
Thank you, Raj. One thing I'm doing, a facilitation technique that I briefly want to share with you, is I'm trying to type the exact words that you have used. And I strongly encourage you to do that, because often some of the nuance is left out if you use your own words. And often it makes the person who spoke feel not heard if you don't use their words. All right. Thank you very much for sharing those.
I have a question, please.
Please.
This is Jindai Brandon Sal.
Hi.
Hi. One of the responses, getting marketing updates. I guess I'm not really clear on what that means. Getting market updates.
Would you like to share with, I'm going to talk about that later, but the person who said that, would you please elaborate if you'd like to?
Again, I think basically you need to, the stakeholders will give you updates of what is happening on the market, especially relating to the product you're developing. And so you can basically use that to inspect and adapt to your product backlog.
Do you mean like the roadmap?
Not the roadmap, not the roadmap really. Maybe the competition has come up with something superior to what you're working on. So you get the updates, and then you probably take that back to your product backlog to update what you're working on as well, what you need to do better.
Very good, Idris.
Okay, that's kind of one of my pet peeves, is when you're presenting something that you've completed, but all your stakeholders are just talking about other things that they want, and it kind of muddies the water.
So we're going to come back to that. And Idris, I'd like you to, feel free to chime in. And also, is it Jindai?
Jindai.
Jindai. Jindai didn't sound right. So to my ears, so Jindai. Okay, very good. So let's look at this. And this is going to be a bit of an eye chart. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And I'm going to invite anyone who would like to read some of this aloud. Oh, wow. What did he do? Purpose of a sprint review. Louise, this is big. This is from the 2017 version of the Scrum Guide. And we're going to scroll up a little bit. Okay. And there we go. So if we look at the top item there, the result of the sprint review, I'll read that one, it's short. The result of the sprint review is a revised product backlog that defines the probable product backlog items for the next sprint. The product backlog may also be adjusted overall to meet new opportunities. And when it says adjusted overall, it means other items in the product backlog besides the items that are coming up in the next sprint. Now, would anyone be willing, so that it's not monotonous by hearing my voice, to read this second section here, this paragraph about the sprint review? You don't have to, but if you're willing to, I'd encourage it.
I can read it.
Great, thank you.
All right, it says sprint review. A sprint review is held at the end of the sprint to inspect the increment and adapt to the product backlog if needed. During the sprint review, the Scrum team and stakeholders collaborate about what was done in the sprint. Based on that and any changes to the product backlog during the sprint, attendees collaborate on the next things that could be done to optimize value. It is an informal meeting, not a status meeting, and the presentation of the increment is intended to elicit feedback and foster collaboration. This is a 4-hour meeting for 1-month sprints. For shorter sprints, the event is usually shorter. The Scrum Master ensures that the event takes place and that the attendees understand its purpose. The Scrum Master teaches everyone involved to keep it within the time box.
Very good. We should all thank her for doing that. It makes the presentation more exciting for everyone. Thank you. Awesome. Now, is your name Kayla? Or is your
Yes,
name
I'm Kayla.
And who's your friend there?
Muna.
My name is Muna.
We're
Hi
both
there.
aspiring Scrum Masters.
Yeah.
Oh, you came to the right place. I think we can help you out. So,
Awesome. I hope so.
yeah, I'll help you out a little. The Scrum Master should know how this event should run. So the Scrum Master should be knowledgeable and, should gain experience as the process goes along. But you have to start, Kayla, Muna, you have to start somewhere. And this is a bit of a joke. Before I was a Scrum Master, how do I say this? Just before I became a Scrum Master, I wasn't a Scrum Master. How's that for encouragement, Kayla and Muna? Just before I became a Scrum Master, I wasn't one. So that just goes to show that the sky's the limit. Not that the sky's the limit, is that everybody has to start somewhere. So this 2017 version of the Scrum Guide is prescriptive, more prescriptive than the 2020 version. Would anyone like to read these 8 bullets for us? Anyone? We will not laugh. In fact, we'll probably give you a little golf clap.
I can try if that is okay.
Go for it, please. Thank you.
Okay. The sprint review includes the following elements. Attendees include the Scrum team and key stakeholders invited by the product owner. The product owner explains what product backlog items have been done and what has not been done. The development team discusses what went well during the sprint, what problems it ran into, and how those problems were solved. The development team demonstrates the work that it has done and answers questions about the increment. The product owner discusses the product backlog as it stands. He or she projects likely target and delivery dates based on progress to date if needed. The entire group collaborates on what to do next so that the sprint review provides valuable input to subsequent sprint planning. Review of how the marketplace or potential use of the product might have changed what is the most valuable thing to do next. And review of the timeline, budget, potential capabilities, and marketplace for the next anticipated releases of functionality or capability of the product.
Thank you, Srini. Nice job. We should all, thank Srini, because if it hadn't been for that, you'd listen to me the whole time, except her and Kayla's help. So a couple of things are worth pointing out here. The product owner explains. The product owner discusses. That's interesting. So we got 2 items there that are specifically addressed to the product owner. And yeah, that bullet didn't come across well. So the product owner explains what items have been done. That's interesting. A lot of the sprint reviews I've been to, this doesn't happen. The Scrum Master is also a project manager, and they're explaining what was done and what has not been done. The development team discusses what went well during the sprint. This is an awesome thing to do. What went well during the sprint, what problems it ran into, and how those problems were solved. So I'm going to give you a tip, and if you have your keyboard or pen and paper handy, have your developers come to the sprint review with a list, maybe a short list of the challenges they experienced in last sprint. And then the Scrum Master can keep track of those and send it out after the sprint review. And what do you reckon? Sorry, send it out to a key stakeholder or someone who's a leader in the organization. Here's a challenge we experienced in the last sprint. Now, if the leader's a good one, what might she do with that information? So I'm the Scrum Master. Muna, here's a list of the problems the developers encountered in the last sprint. We would like to not encounter these problems in the future. So if I send that to you, Muna, and you're the leader, if you're a good leader, what are you going to do? You got to unmute. Just guess.
Do you mind posing the question one more time? I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. So I'm typing.
I asked her a question about something.
That's all right. Hi, Muna. I'm so glad that you were able to attend the sprint review. Your opinion is very valued, and we couldn't do this without your help. I wanted to recap some of the problems that the development team ran into in the last sprint. Thank you for your support. Best regards, Russell Miller, Scrum Master. Now, if you're a great leader and I'm providing you with a list of challenges that the developers ran into, what might you do?
As a Scrum Master.
No, I'm the Scrum Master. You're the leader.
I'm the leader. So I guess the product owner?
No, you're like the manager or the director or somebody who can make things happen in the organization.
Okay.
And I've listed some problems and I've emailed you.
Interesting. As the leader, I would figure out.
So what if okay, let's turn it around. What if you're the mama and the kid comes and says, I skipped my knee. Look, it's bleeding. What are you going to do?
I'm going to clean up the wound and put a Band-Aid on it. So I'm going to fix the problem.
You're going to fix the problem.
Yeah, I'm going to fix the problem.
See, I led the witness. So a good leader will work to fix the problems. And a good Scrum Master will keep a list of those. This is a great tip, I think. Yes, Mark? You're on mute. We want to hear you. You're still on mute, but we want to hear you. Okay, good.
Yeah,
you're not on mute.
Go ahead and finish your thought, and then I'll get to my question.
So my thought is this: a super tip would be for a Scrum Master to maintain the list of these challenges, and then in Excel or Word, you keep a list of columns for the sprint that challenge has existed. And so, this sprint's challenges existed. And so once you see a lot of X's across this line and you're sending it to the leaders, then this is a conversation you can have with your leaders, especially if the leader says, why is this not happening? And what's the challenge with this? And I really want you to do this. You can say, oh, I'd love to do those things. There's a couple of challenges I'd like to bring to your attention, and I really think you could help with these. And then you discuss that with the leader. And of course, if the leader's good, they're going to see this list of things with all these problems going sprint after sprint after sprint, and they're going to either want the team to fix them or want to fix them themselves. And if they try to get the team to fix them and the team says, we can't, and here's why we can't, then that's a way to get things acted upon. Yes, Mark.
So I was just going to share, Russell, from my point of view, that all sounds really easy, but as being a former developer, developers can get into the weeds really quick. The pool gets deep really fast after getting in the shallow end. And so you can a lot of times just take a list from the developers and say, here, management, solve these problems, because they're going to be like, I have no idea what this translated for me.
So your advice would be what, Mark? I'm sure you have good advice. I'm not being cynical. What would you advise?
Yeah, so just working with the developers to try to come up with something that a layman can understand. Okay, I hear what you're saying about these frameworks and about all these dependencies you have. How would you explain it to someone so that our CEO can understand? Help me be able to put this in an easy to digest way to understand.
That's really, really great advice, Mark. Thank you very much.
Can I
Here's
actually
the-
add a comment to that?
Yes, please.
So actually, Mark, to that point, I feel like you might disagree with this. I actually think that's why it is vital, can be very valuable for Scrum Masters and product owners to not actually have a technical background in some instances, because they can say that doesn't really make sense, that's not really translating, or hey, we might want to approach it or present it in this way. So I think that's actually one of the values of people in our roles, to be able to be the translator in some respect and turn those challenges into coherent thoughts.
Yeah,
that's the coaching aspect right there.
Raj, I would take one comment from you, and then I'm going to put it in fifth gear.
Sure. Categorization is typically what I see as a challenge coming out of the product manager and Scrum Masters, right? And again, my role is usually the program manager, reporting to the C-suite, and I'm usually trying to solve the problems by figuring out, is it a timing issue? Meaning, do we need to have more time on certain activities or certain backlog items, or do we need additional resources? I mean, we need to spend and add more budget, right? So typically I'm going to 2 or 3 categories, and when the list is produced, they're not categorized well enough, right? Okay. We don't want to hear about what the developers may need to do to develop their skills. We want to hear, oh, we have inefficiency in that development group, so therefore we need to have somebody a little bit more expert, or we need to stretch the project out longer so that team can build their talent.
So what I would invite you to do, Raj, thank you for that comment. I sincerely mean that. What I'd love for you to do is take some notes in this next section and reflect on what I suggest and compare that to what you just said. And the reason, let me be real specific. The reason is the sprint review exists in the framework for some very specific reasons. And what you said, I don't disagree with, but what I'll be real, candid, but I wonder if some of those activities are not better discussed in a different event. The short version of the sprint review is that the purpose is to inspect some things with transparency and adapt the product backlog. That's the reason the event is in the framework. And that's the only reason the event is in the framework. If we thought nothing would ever change in the conditions that I'm getting ready to explain to you, then we wouldn't ever have a sprint review. It'd just be a waste of time. So because of the evolving nature of the marketplace or our work or the customer requirements or team members or budget or need dates from our customers, because of that complexity, we need a pause to inspect and adapt the product backlog. So the short version, inspect the product backlog, inspect the result of the sprint, the increment, inspect, this one's often overlooked. So you might want to, I'm telling you the things that, might want to take note that are, often overlooked. Inspect the learnings. I think you mentioned this, Glenn. Inspect the learnings from doing the work of the last sprint. It's one thing to plan, but you learn a lot from doing. So what did we learn? We should reflect on that from completing the work of the last sprint. Inspect the current business conditions. And so that was discussed earlier. And the idea there is, for example, did our competitor come up with a new feature that we need to replicate? Has COVID happened? And does our business have to change dramatically? Do we have to shrink our budgets to be able to keep afloat during this time of pandemic? Did we have cutbacks for other reasons? Do we have to accelerate our schedule for some reason? These are all what we call current business conditions, which is
Russell. I don't know, for example, if Zoom is developed with Scrum, could you picture sprint reviews in March of 2020, seeing where the world was going. I mean, that their backlog, they might have had to just completely shuffle things around.
Yes, and I suspect, even though I love Microsoft and love the products, you know, if they'd hadn't had a leg up on Zoom, then we'd all be using Teams right this minute instead of Zoom. Adapt the product backlog. That's one of the short versions of things we should do in the sprint review. Adapt the product backlog and adapt the product backlog. Gosh, Russell, what are you trying to tell us? Anyone? Anyone? Yanette? Anyone? Nanad? You're on mute. We want to hear you. Oh, you're not on mute.
Adapt the product backlog.
Yeah. Oh, look, awesome. That is great. So the reason the sprint review exists, the reason it exists is to say to ourselves, well, we planned on doing these things. So are we still planning to do these things? Because we learned some things from the last sprint. We have an increment to inspect. We want to inspect the current market conditions. We look at the existing product backlog and ask ourselves what needs to change. Because we, as a Scrum team, are getting ready to work for another sprint. And are we going in the right direction, or do we need to change directions? So I'm going to accelerate just a little bit because we don't have too much to go. Go ahead.
There's a term for that when you don't do that. Agile fall.
Agile fall.
Right?
That's good.
It's still waterfall, but now you're just doing it every 2 weeks. You are not adjusting after each 2 weeks and adapting.
So what I would like you to do briefly, we'll take maybe 30 seconds. On your own, write down a list of things you think should be inspected in the sprint review. And if you want to write some of the things down that you remember from what we just discussed, a couple of key things, writing it down or typing it down, it actually helps you remember it longer. So I'm not asking for new material. I'm asking for, if you thought I was correct with some of the advice I gave you previously, what things should we inspect during the sprint review? There's the list. You might want to take down a couple of those. Okay. For the sake of time, I'm going to accelerate and probably be a little less participant involvement, because I want to leave time for this call to action. So here are the results if we don't focus on the things above. The product backlog isn't the focus. That's a result. Inspection of the best things are excluded. Changes in the business environment, changes of customer need states, changes of desirements. Desirements are requirements that may or may not end up being required. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but I love it. Changed budget, changed personnel, changed work location, like going fully remote. I'm working with one team that closed their office and they're all at home. Ignore learnings from the last sprint. These are learnings from the sprint that just ended. So these are what the results of the, if we don't focus on those key things. Here's your call to action. After this presentation, or maybe even because of information you gained before here, what can you do without any permission to make your next sprint review better? So type that down or write that down. Has to be perfect. Just what would you think you might want to do differently after having participated in this event? And it's something without permission. I used to be a member of a health club, Mark, and I would go in and talk to the fella who used to play football for, trying to remember, some school just right up the road from Hopkinsville in Kentucky. And I was embarrassed, and I was embarrassed at how long it had been, Glenn, since I'd come in to work out. And I came in and said, hey, it's been a while since I saw you. I'd say that to him, Yanette. And he said, that's all right. A little bit of something is better than a whole lot of nothing. So a little bit of something as an improvement is better than a whole lot of nothing. So write down beside the improvement you want to make, how will you do it? How would you accomplish it? Anyone? Not anyone, like share with me. I mean, do you have an idea of, I think I can do this, and write down how you think you might do it, or put a little placeholder there so that you can think about that after this presentation. Can you think about anybody that would be willing to hold you accountable for this improvement if you ask them to? So you could sketch that out. It's like, I think we might improve this, and this one or two sentences, and I might do it this way, and maybe you have to come back to that. Most everybody knows someone that could hold them accountable. So after this presentation, I said right now, but we have very little time. After this presentation, I encourage you, draft an email to your accountability partner right now with your action that you want to do, and ask them to follow up with you by Friday and ask you if you've got a plan to implement that, or maybe you've got a sprint review coming up and you've implemented it. So with that, Glenn, I'll let you close this, and I'm willing to hang around for a while if you want to chat. I'm really grateful for your time and consider it a privilege that you would give this time to Glenn and I.